Despite reports of progress in negotiations, both chambers of Congress will head into Christmas recess without an agreement in place to address the Biden administration's disastrous open border policies. Well, obviously, this sets the table for a busy January when they get back to Capitol Hill. And as Congress will return to Washington with that on their plate, there's a lot of other things to deal with as well, such as spending battles or potentially a government shutdown. What else? What other issues should we anticipate when they come back in January? Well, joining me now to discuss this and more is Congressman Tim Walberg. He serves on the House Energy and Commerce Committee as well as the Committee on Education and Workforce. He represents the 5th Congressional District of the great state of Michigan. Congressman Walberg, welcome back to Washington Watch. Always great to see you.
Jody, it's good to be with you. Good to see you, and we continue to miss you.
Well, thank you so much. And just always, I love your tie. It matches my jacket myself. So way to go, man. Great minds thinking here. Listen, before we get into some of the issues that you and your colleagues are going to be dealing with in January when you come back from the Christmas recess, I'd love to get initial thoughts on the voter suppression tactics that are really taking place against President Trump coming out of Colorado.
Well, I was interested to hear the Lieutenant Governor of California talk about this is something that really shows what we ought to do. I mean, stop and think about it. The due process that normally is carried out with someone who is convicted of something already, in this case, insurrection, hasn't taken place. A state Supreme Court 2,000 miles removed from the alleged crime takes a federal law and constitution and enacts a penalty by removing arguably the number one candidate from the opposition party from the ballot in Colorado. That makes sense, doesn't it?
It's frightening. I mean, you bring up some excellent points, but underneath all of this, Congressman, I tell you, it's just frightening to see what we're doing, and we're going to be going deeper into this as the program unfolds. But now we have California and Maine and other states, as you just well said, because the governor of California is saying, let's jump on board with this. Unbelievable. But if I can, let me switch gears with you some. You have an incredibly busy January coming up when you and your colleagues return. What are your priorities? What do you think is going to be the focus of the party when you get back into session?
Well, certainly the focus is to get our appropriations package done so we can have stability in our government funding. And our priority, of course, in the House, we've been debating the issue of reducing spending and doing it in a targeted way and ultimately get to pre-COVID spending levels. That will put us significantly on a track to balance our budget, reduce our deficit spending, and ultimately move toward starting to take a whack at our debt. But along that line, we also have requirements that we made to the Senate. And Chuck Schumer talks about the fact that the House didn't get their work done. Well, yes, we did. We sent them several bills that they ought to take up, all of which deal with funding for various concerns that they have, Israel, Ukraine. But we've attached it to border funding, believing that our H.R. 2 language, which we've passed, that puts our border in a secure position, that puts our Customs and Border agents into positions they have been trained to do, that secures our border so that we know that immigrants that come through legally. We reduce the unnecessary and tragic incursion of fentanyl and other terrible drugs, human trafficking, and even immigrants who are thinking they're coming to a country that is unique in the world because it's a country of laws. That bill is there in the Senate. They could have the funding for Israel. They could have the funding for Ukraine with other things we put in for accounting practices on spending in Ukraine, and they could do it before they leave this week. But we did what they have done, as you remember, Jody. In the past, the Senate would wait till the very end jam us with an omni bill, leave town, and stick us with the problem. We decided this time to do our work, do it well, send it to the Senate, and then leave town ourselves. Thankfully, the Republican
Good
senators,
strategy.
the Republican senators,
Yeah.
seeing what we did, it gave them a bit of backbone to stick up for the right and just causes and push back on Schumer, and he wasn't able to jam the House and do things that would not help the American public.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, whatever the Senate comes up with is going to have to pass the House. Like you said, you've already done your job. They haven't even looked at those bills, but what they send back is going to need to pass the House. And the House is resolute. We got to deal with the border, so this is going to be interesting. Speaking of the border, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre continues, in my opinion, to mislead the American public. I want to play this clip for you and get your reaction to this. Play clip 7, please.
And what we're seeing here at the border, the migration flow, increased migration flow, certainly it ebbs and flows. And we're at a time of the year where we're seeing more at the border, and it's not unusual.
So is what we're seeing at the border not unusual?
Well, it's not unusual for this administration. This is ebbed and flow all through the first 3 years of Biden being in office, and it's ebbed and flow in increasing fashions. I mean, when you think that last week there was a day we had over 11,000 people cross the border illegally, and we've had that numerous times across this 3-year period. This is an incredible incursion, and sadly, the gotaways, who we don't know who they are, may be people that are setting up cells, terrorist cells, like we had in the country on 9/11. That's a concern. And this KGP, as we call her, and President Biden himself, and others in his administration, including the border czar, our vice president, have been incapable of dealing with this. But sadly, they're incapable of dealing with it was probably by design, to allow this incursion to come into the border. I mean, we have several large cities, massive cities of illegal immigrants in this country right now that we will have to contend with for years to come. And legal immigrants who want to do it the right way should be those that are most frustrated that they now are in a country that doesn't abide by its own rules.
Yeah, it is amazing when you talk about the incompetence. You really have to conclude when all is said and done. This goes beyond incompetence. This has every appearance in the world of deliberate actions coming from this administration. Congressman Tim Walberg from Michigan, thank you so much for joining us on Washington Watch. Wishing you and your dear family all the best and a very Merry Christmas to you.